Before we begin, I just want to say that throughout this commentary, I will be calling this person Galbanum, Rin, and Damien. All three of which are names this person has said they're fine with being called. And yes, recent events have made me feel the need to talk about Galbanum. Specifically, their November 2022 video on Boonslayer. A video I have mentioned previously through giving it the #1 spot on my list of the top 10 worst commentaries of 2022. However, in that video, I only really scratched the surface of my issues with the commentary in question. Although I did go over what were my biggest issues with the video, there's still far more that can be talked about. So, let's talk about it. No time like the present, after all. I'm gonna be skipping the first minute, by the way, as it's primarily discussion as to why this video is unlisted, put together with a call to not harass Boonslayer.
So there's this video that an SCC YouTuber named Boonslayer made a video on someone who I consider to be a lol cow named Sonic Shadow 98, or just a Sonic Shadow channel now.
Okay, a couple of things. First off, it's Boonslayer, not Boonslater. Not a big deal, but I figured I will point out that you mispronounced Boon's name. Also, the user in question was not known as the Sonic Shadow channel at the time the video was uploaded. He had been known as that when Boon did his commentary. By the time you did your video, he had rebranded to the Sladester 2000.
The video starts off with Boon stating that there was a commentary-related dramatic event that brewed for approximately a year, as he alleges. Debatable if you would ask me, given how I see Sonic Shadow as a low-hanging fruit of some sort, not some sort of destructive force in the SCC.
I'm sorry, since when did you need to be a destructive force in order to be the center of a dramatic event? This is an incredibly weird false dichotomy you're creating with no basis, best as I can tell. I also want to point out that you say Sladester is a low-hanging fruit and not a destructive force, but who's to say those are mutually exclusive attributes? Caleb Maupin was considered a low-hanging fruit by a large chunk of the online left, for example, with some of his bizarre and bombastic statements becoming memes in those communities, with clips like this serving as an example.
Me and a black dude might be equally exploited working at a Burger King together. Say you're working at Burger King. Your coworker comes to you because they know you're a big-time lefto, big-time workers' rights kind of person, and they're like, hey, I think I might be trans, and I want to start to transition, but I'm really afraid that if I do, I'll lose my job.
Burger King.
However, later information about him revealed that, despite being a low-hanging fruit, behind the scenes he was also a destructive force, with many of his former colleagues discussing how he was essentially acting as a predatory cult leader behind the scenes. And by the way, these could be called dramatic events because those also aren't mutually exclusive. And furthermore, you could have dramatic events without destructive forces. This whole standard you're pretending exists is entirely arbitrary, is my point.
When I think of destructive forces or commentary-related dramatic events, in your words, in communities,
which, again, you have arbitrarily decided are the same things. Never mind how drama is actually kind of used to downplay interpersonal problems people have in order to imply they aren't destructive, hence why, for example, somebody may take issue with a serious situation being called drama, such as when Queen Seraphina went after Camila Cuevas for referring to the Glitchtail situation as exactly that.
People have criticized you for the absolute travesty that was your first statement. Your words were not picked through. You put those words out yourself, provided no proof for your defense, and lied to your impressionable audience. Not only that, but you were also criticized by people who weren't happy when you referred to the situation as drama. Situations involving child predation are not drama. But you'll sit here and play victim without recognizing why people have a problem with what you've done.
Or why a person may take pains to differentiate a serious situation they're discussing from drama. The aforementioned Seraphina video also provides an example of this, funnily enough. Although she doesn't drop the word, she does make it clear in the introduction that what she's currently talking about is not comparable to the previous more lighthearted topics that she has talked about in the rest of her content.
Yes, I know we're stepping into a minefield where many people will just watch this video for a little bit of time and not care for its contents. Those people are lost causes. This isn't like my previous videos where it's all fun and games. This video is going to contain serious and disturbing content that will demand true accountability by default.
If anything, the connotations of the words go against the point you're making, meaning this once again just seems utterly nonsensical.
I think IDKY Hanafu, Levi Matters, Sonic 93, Creepshow Art, Prisonmate Luke, and others that have ruined lives for long periods of time. I don't think an idiot that may or may not have low-functioning autism.
I want to discuss that line real quick. May or may not have low-functioning autism. It's not incorrect per se. Sladester may or may not have low-functioning autism. He could have it, and he also could not have it. The problem is that statement doesn't actually mean anything. Yeah, it's both possible he does and possible he doesn't, but the same is true for every human being in existence, regardless of if they have it or not. You could say this about literally anybody. You haven't actually communicated anything to your viewers by saying it. I also want to address the use of the phrase low functioning in general real quick, because that's not actually something psychologists use when diagnosing people with autism. Instead, the DSM groups autistic individuals by how much support they need to function in society. Something that was adopted in 2013, by the way. And while on the topic, I might as well point out that even when the term was used by professionals, it was never something you had. You were never diagnosed with low-functioning autism. You were an autistic person who was low-functioning. For those unaware, the terms high and low functioning were originally coined to differentiate between autistic people with and without intellectual disabilities. If you had an intellectual disability, you were low functioning. If you did not, you were high functioning.
Like, take a look at this clip here and tell me how this guy is not a laughingstock or doesn't come across as him being mentally stable in, like, any sort of way.
I am about to go road rage on the Among Us fanbase for trending the shit. Dark Sonic Shadow 98 will be victorious, and soon, many months and years later, Among Us will stop being relevant.
Says the person who couldn't even pronounce the name of the person they're covering correctly. I'm sorry, what about that showed a sign of mental instability? If you want to call him a laughingstock, that's fine, although I personally wouldn't mention both that and mental instability together because it comes off like you're saying the mentally unstable are laughingstocks. Almost certainly not what you intended, but it's an unfortunate implication I figured I'd point out. But from where I'm sitting, it just seems like Sladester was being hyperbolic for the sake of entertainment. This was a sketch done to exaggerate his opinions. This is no more a sign of being mentally disturbed than the angry video game nerd destroying his television because he's really mad at Top Gun on the NES.
Die! Hadouken! Sonic Boom!
And let's not get into how the Nostalgia Critic reacted when Quest for Camelot failed to explain things adequately.
Aren't you gonna fill us in, movie? Aren't you gonna let us know what's going on?
Just act.
Sorry.
And to make things worse, it went on to reference Dirty Harry.
Oh, you've got to ask yourself, do I feel clucky? Well, do ya, punk?
Sorry, I'm going for two!
What I'm getting at is this is an incredibly common trope for the types of YouTube videos you're watching, specifically ones where people angrily express their dislike for something. I used those two examples because they were the most well known for a very long period of time. However, you could find content like this anywhere way back in the day, and you still can in some circles if you know where to look. People like Dark Lord Jado, Cinematic Excrements, and the Mysterious Mr. Enter, even if they may not go to the same extremes those two once did, still do make caustic commentary a key part of their online persona. Fuck, here's a clip from Jado just a few months ago.
It's a game called 1912 Titanic Mystery. And if you're wondering why I seized on this one particular game out of the mountains of trash, it's because I reviewed this game 10.5 years ago! Back when it was a full release game on the Wii! Yeah, I got it from the library and it had its own disc and everything. And now it's a brand new download-only title on a console 2 generations later with a $10 price tag regularly knocked down to $2. How the mighty have fallen! Or rather, how the mighty have no business still being around!
And by the way, do you know who else plays up their anger in their videos for the sake of entertainment and has made negativity a core part of their persona? Boone. But we'll get to that in a bit.
Boone also starts off with a compliment, but goes about it in a way I disagree with, like how he compliments Sonic Shadow, but does it in a very backhanded way. Like saying, it's a compliment, get over it, implying someone would have a grudge over someone saying a video opening is okay.
Okay, a few things. First off, can you actually play these clips you're talking about? I know you can play segments of Boone's video. You do it later on. That's how you commentate on him. It's far from the biggest deal in the world, but it's just a weird structural choice to not play any clips except for this one specific section of the video, especially if you're going to make reference to other parts of it. Also, you got what Boone said a tad wrong. The get over it line was about his first setup point being a compliment, not his first point in general.
Yes, I'm serious. My first setup point is a fucking compliment. Get over it.
Specifically, he's pointing out how he thinks that Sladester's intro in the first video of his Covered is at the very least on the right track, even if it could use some improvements.
Well, this intro was actually on the right path, I'd say, but just needed some tweaks. This is going to be relevant to what I have to say about a later video.
Boone brings this up because, as he discusses when he covers the next video from Sladesters he commentated on, his intro had actually gotten worse since the first video covered.
So remember what I said earlier about the intro not being half bad? This is more than half bad. Whole thing is too long, first of all. The timing's not there, and the best thing I can honestly say about it is the choice of clips and music actually still suit your brand and aren't all over the place in tone. What I'm about to say will be more relevant later, but this is a sign of a downward slope in quality.
I also don't get what's backhanded about Boone's comment, even with how you summarize it. A backhanded compliment is a compliment that only works because the wider context reveals it to actually be somewhat of an insult. For example, if I tell somebody they don't look as ugly as they normally do, that's a backhanded compliment because I am implying that they typically look ugly. That's not what Boone was doing here. How does Boone's statement fall into that category? I don't get this. You mentioned the get over it line, but that wasn't backhanded. It wasn't even aimed at Sladester, the person he was complimenting originally.
Being fair to Boone, the video has valid points. I didn't like my first impression, but over time I liked how humorous the video was. Albeit some moments he does throw around insults I deem unnecessary for the situation, given I feel that Sonic Shadow is a little, let's just say, loony.
Boone uses insults you deem as unnecessary, you say, before describing Sladester as loony, a word so widely seen as insulting that one dictionary website I found specifically made note of its offensive connotations in its definitions.
Hell, Boone even says that Sonic Shadow has a warped sense of reality. That was until his outro. I understand getting frustrated, but given how angry Boone gets, I don't care what he says, his words do come across as him being infuriated. I feel I needed to say something here. There's being harsh, and then there's this.
I am about to go road raids on the Among Us fanbase for training the shit. Dark Sonic Shadow 98 will be victorious, and soon, many months and years later, Among Us will stop being relevant.
Sorry, I just put that clip there to make the point that, well, remember how I said Rin's may or may not have low-functioning autism statement could apply to anybody? And you know how Boone is like a person?
And now it all comes together, doesn't it? First of all, allow me to clarify something. Two things, actually. First of all, the Slayer is not capitalized. S isn't capital. It's just Boone Slayer, one word. Second of all, that was not a rivalry. That was me making points and him flopping on the ground like a goldfish forcibly ejected from its bowl.
I don't know who this Cory Majira is.
Neither would I if this were my first exposure to the situation, because this is the first time Cory is actually mentioned by name in this video. Mind you, Boone is talking about Cory in that last clip when he mentioned something that wasn't a rivalry, but was him making points and somebody else not doing so. However, he wasn't name-dropped in that clip. And this is especially noticeable because this could have been fixed by just playing a couple more seconds of Boone's video, specifically through starting the section you play for the sake of this interjection with Sladester mentioning Cory as opposed to with Boone starting to talk, making it so the first thing we'd hear would be this.
Whatever. I'm done here. All I can say is that I legitimately hate the commentary community even more, and I am glad that Cory Margera exposed the commentary community back in 2016 during the whole rivalry with Boone Slayer.
It would also give us context as to why Boone is mentioning the fact that his name is spelt a certain way. Seriously, without that, there's literally no reason for him to do such. I also want to make note of this awkward silence text you put on screen, if only because it shows you didn't understand why Boone went quiet. It was to punctuate what was just said in order to make the audience aware that it was incredibly important, specifically to a major theme in Boone Canon 49, that being Sladester's resemblance to the aforementioned Cory Margera. This is also something that's built up throughout the video. Boone specifically notes when Sladester says something that is rhetorically incredibly similar to what Cory has said.
This is all just nostalgia bait. Tom Holland is horrible as Spider-Man. Fact, not an opinion, but a fact.
That rhetoric sounds familiar.
He then goes on to note that Sladester is citing Cory, although he does also acknowledge that the point Sladester is making isn't incorrect.
Because the thing is, like Cory Margera brought up, that people will demand original content, yet when original content comes out, they never support it.
Huh. Very weird for you to bring up agreeing with a Cory Margera point. I mean, it's a valid point. People demand new things, but when they get them, there's a lot of times that it gets ignored or chastised. But, you know, that's where that rhetoric started to sound familiar to me. So, it's very interesting. And for my audience, it's all starting to come together a little bit, isn't it?
Then, lastly, we have Sladester directly referencing Cory Margera as a source for something that is incorrect. There's a lot more going on than you realize, and your dismissive little comment is actually a very good microcosm of you ignoring the wider picture. It's almost like only focusing on the last bit of a video isn't a good idea or something. Especially when said final thoughts begin with a comment that make it clear that it's expanding upon ideas that were already foreshadowed earlier in the video. That's what Boone meant by, and now it all comes together. The aforementioned references to Corey, which might have seemed like superfluous things to make special note of previously, now finally have reached their conclusion, and the viewer understands why Boone put so much emphasis on something they might feel is unimportant. Also, it's pronounced Margera, not Mujera.
I was not there during the whole 2016 debacle.
Debacle, not debacle.
But that can be subjective.
Okay, you aren't wrong here. That could, in theory, be a subjective statement. It could also be an objective statement, and a statement that is both objective and subjective. However, saying that doesn't really mean anything, and given you just admitted you don't know much about this situation, it comes off as you essentially just going, I hypothesize, that's like your opinion, man.
You didn't really explain about Corey Majira either, about him flopping on his own points.
Boone didn't say that. What he said was that Corey wasn't making points and that he was flopping around like a goldfish forcefully ejected from his bowl. I also can't help but wonder what exactly you want him to do. Is he supposed to, for example, list a series of things Corey said which brought him to this conclusion? Because if so, that would require him to completely break the flow of the commentary in order to talk about somebody different. And by the way, Boone actually did do such. He specifically made note of actions Sladester has done which have resulted in his arguments being more faulty that were also shared by Corey.
But it all just makes sense, doesn't it? Referencing an opinion as fact, the constant lashing out when someone responds to you in any way. I mean, shit, some more profanity and an actual charismatic bone in your fucking body, and you'd basically be Corey Margera's Sonic OC Donut Steel, wouldn't you, buddy? And you present with all the fucking traits, including your complete and utter inability to make a point beyond spouting meaningless buzzwords with a lack of self-awareness reserved for the driest of BuzzFeed articles with half the vocabulary.
Both of those clips are played in their commentary, by the way, so I know for a fact they saw them. And yet they're completely ignored for the sake of this point.
You explained earlier in the video sort of about him. Sort of, but given how the video is fragmented and only covers certain points of Sonic Shadows 3 videos, and you don't go over, well, Corey as a person in here, it's sort of leaving me in the dark, bro.
Okay, so this point is really jumbled and confusing, so much so that it almost sounds like they're saying that they didn't explain who Corey was well enough because they only covered certain parts of Sladester's video. However, I at least get what you mean. You don't feel like Boone did a good enough job providing the information required to understand the Corey situation, or at least how it connects to this one. You mentioned Boone did give information about Margera earlier in the video. However, you don't explain what said information is, which, funnily enough, leaves your audience in the dark. Furthermore, what are you expecting him to do? Recap all of the information in these final thoughts? Even though final thoughts are traditionally used to summarize the information and opinions expressed in the body of the video? Also, with all this talk about Boone leaving his audience in the dark in regards to who Corey is, I only have to ask, who are IDKY Hanafu? Who, to make things even worse by the way, I actually had trouble researching because it sounds like you said Canafu, not Hanafu. I swear I listened to it like 10 times. Every fucking time I heard Canafu. Levi Matters, Sonic 93, Creepshow Arts, and Prison Mate Luke. And what did they do which ruined unspecified lives for equally unspecified long periods of time? Mind you, I am asking those questions totally rhetorically because I not only know the answer, but also do agree with Gal's description of them. However, that doesn't change the fact that you are getting onto Boone for not providing a proper amount of elaboration on this topic when you name-dropped 5 people and your entire explanation of them came down to a single sentence.
And to be honest, I'm not interested in watching the Corey Majira video.
But you would be fine with him taking time from a totally separate video to explain who Corey was so he could make brief references to the guy?
Your videos don't tend to strike my fancy. You're also saying this as if this is a fact, when it could just be a matter of opinion of yours.
You just fucking said this, right down to the similar wording of it could just be a matter of opinion, which, as I pointed out before, doesn't fucking mean anything. This video is terribly structured.
Maybe you could explain further to me, but I am confused as to how this is a point to make without something to back it up.
What do you mean by something to back it up? Clearly he's trying to imply that the similarities between Sladester and Corey Margera are causing Sladester to be worse than he would be without said similarities. The evidence for this is that he just cited Corey Margera as having exposed the SCC, which Boonslayer feels inaccurately represents the situation.
So I asked a bit, and apparently it is a terrible video. That's all I need to know, I guess? Whatever.
I really hate how that line is delivered. Like, no joke, whenever I hear it, all I can think of is...
WTF, OMG, you guys, what in the world do these words even mean?
But it all just makes sense, doesn't it?
Could you not?
Referencing an opinion as fact, the constant lashing out when someone responds to you in any way. I mean, shit, some more profanity and an actual charismatic bone in your fucking body, and you'd basically be Corey Margera's Sonic OC Donut Steel, wouldn't you, buddy? Oh, I'm sorry. Did that sound condescending to you?
Yes.
Oh man, there was such a point in all of that. It was so pointy.
Good. It sounds like I'm condescending to you. Because I fucking am, kid. You have earned my condescension.
You see, I like this text because I can't help but wonder exactly how Rin would respond if Boone's final thoughts were more like,
Dark Sonic Shadow 98!
Because, see, I'm not like the other people who've talked about you. Other people try to be polite about their criticisms because they don't want to hurt feelings or sound overly critical or come off as malicious. And under normal circumstances, that's what I'd do as well. But here's the problem. I know your fucking breed, little man.
This is you acting as if Sonic Shadow is a species that is a danger to you?
Where the fuck did you get that? I get the species thing, but where did Boone say that Sladester was actually dangerous to him? You don't explain that.
And worthy of disrespect when he is just a lolcow in the community. I doubt some dude that gets mad at sus will do damage. He is just gonna get made fun of.
When did Boone say that Sladester was going to do damage? I checked, and best as I can tell, it never fucking happened. You added that in order to make Boone's claims sound more extreme than they actually were.
Just like other attempts at hurting the SCC, his attempt failed and miserably so. Doesn't mean that you have to treat him like a subhuman, like sheesh, this dude clearly has some issues.
Okay, so I have a lot of different opinions on that point, but the biggest issue I have is you keep fucking jumbling shit together in ways that don't make any sense. Again, Boone never called him a danger. I find it ironic you're saying that Boone disrespects Sladester while you're also calling him a lolcow, which for those unaware is essentially just internet lingo for somebody who is considered a laughingstock, who you say we should just laugh at, by the way, meaning you do think they should be disrespected, at least on that level. Also, why does your definition of disrespect not include laughing at him and calling him mentally unstable and loony?
And I know that no matter what I say, you're not gonna listen.
What's the point in making the video if you were constructive in the video but you feel you wouldn't listen? You make a 180 and suddenly you're incredibly overbearing.
Well, off the very top of my head, it could be Boone trying to tell the audience what to do if they ever find themselves in a similar situation to Sladester. That's just one possibility right there. Another possibility, albeit one that's somewhat tied to the first one, is that Boone is simply documenting the behavior of Sladester for those who would find the topic interesting. I also want to point out that you have provided no examples of Boone being constructive in the body of his video. So far, all you've mentioned, aside from one compliment, is the insults.
For example, when I made my video series on Ethel and Levi with Ephraim, I made the videos harsher after Essence of Thought and Levi blatantly lied about people in slanderous ways.
I'm sorry, what do you mean by after they did that? That was what those videos were about from the start. They were covering videos Essence of Thought did where she lied about Lily Orchard in order to accuse her of predation. At what point were they not lying about people in slanderous ways?
I knew they wouldn't listen because they are liars and people like that don't like realizing that. But Ethel and Levi are clearly conscious adults. Shadow is a very different case. He clearly doesn't function in reality.
You haven't shown that.
He doesn't have as much of a fan base as those two do.
Wait, where does the size of their fan base come into this equation? Because up until now, your entire point has been that Sladester lacks the cognitive ability to make this treatment worth it. Are you now implying that it would be fine if Sladester had a larger fan base? I don't get why you added this comment.
You realize that you saying he's not gonna listen is you implying he may not change his ways, right? What's the point in making this video then? This attitude is jarring even after you read his disaster of a community post. You clearly seem to care, but yet you say he won't listen.
Are those contradictory statements? I'm so fucking confused right now.
Even though he states he is trying to better himself?
Yeah, and Boone feels like he's not actually doing that. Boone even made note of a video that came out after the community post where he said that he was trying to do such despite using the same rhetoric he had been criticized for, which again he had taken from Corey.
You even made a video somewhat recently as of scripting where you said you were going to take measures to improve yourself. But yet, what's in that video?
If you're gonna start crap with me, if you're gonna shove bad taste down my throat, Pokemon is overrated. Fact. Not an opinion, but a fact. A scientifically proven fact that can never ever be debated or argued.
Again, this is a clip that was played in your commentary, so I know for a fact you saw it. It could be either because Sladester is just talking the talk and not walking the walk, or because he actively does not know how. And by the way, the discussion of him trying to improve is actually discussed later. You're jumping the gun a little here. Same thing with the "you clearly care" remark, because Boone hasn't said anything that indicates he doesn't. He does a little later on, but we're not at that part yet.
You saying he won't listen to criticism is an implication of him not wanting to change, which is very destructive. I believe humbly that if someone states someone will never change without serious points of evidence, that is just a form of mental abuse. I'm not saying you're abusing him here, like, just for the record. I'm trying to make that perfectly clear. It's just, it's very hurtful.
Then why did you bring it up? That's really my main issue with this point. Why did you feel the need to mention what Boone is doing qualifying as mental abuse under specific circumstances if you didn't think Boone was meeting said criteria? Because if we run under the assumption that you are not calling Boone a mental abuser and are instead just saying what he's doing would be mental abuse if he didn't provide proper evidence, then, again, there was no reason to even mention this. I should also note that if Rin called Boone a mental abuser is something we're going to be discussing a few more times throughout this commentary. However, for now at least, let's just go with, for the sake of argument, that Rin was not calling Boone a mental abuser, but was instead saying that under certain circumstances, what he's doing could be mental abuse. In which case, once again, we have a statement that doesn't fucking mean anything. Tons of things can be abuse under certain circumstances. Telling somebody you love them could be mental abuse if you're doing it for the purpose of love bombing them, for example. Buying somebody a gift could be mental abuse if you're doing so for the purpose of creating a feeling that said person owes you something through doing it. Essentially, you aren't telling us anything about the action itself with this statement because it can apply to a lot of things.
It'll cause people to internalize that said thought and just self-destruct. Self-harm, if you will.
I will now be skipping the next minute where Rin talks about an incident they had where they were told something similar. However, I will point out that the entire main argument of this video has been that Sladester's psychological state is warped and not similar to those of the average person. However, if that is the case, that begs the question of how exactly Gal could get an accurate understanding of how Sladester would react to these situations through comparing it to their own. I thought their entire point was that Sladester's mental state was so vastly different. And by the way, even if we ignore the hypocrisy, doing this still would not actually validate what Rin is saying because, well, people's mental states are different. People have different triggers and different ways of looking at the world and are going to respond differently even to the exact same situations.
This shit hurts. And considering how Shadow doesn't function in reality...
Unless he's being told he's not going to improve, I guess.
This can seriously hurt him more.
It can also not hurt him at all. Meaningless statements are fun, aren't they? I swear, half this commentary I can just respond to by going,
that is an assertion that PolitiFact rates, yeah, I mean, I guess technically we've got to give him that, but good grief.
I relate to not having sanity at one point. I have done terrible things when I was not in a sound mind. It doesn't excuse anything. You can think what you want, but this doesn't feel right to me.
You know, that's interesting, because it doesn't really feel right to me for you to complain that Boone is leaving his audience in the dark, while also constantly vague posting about unspecified personal experiences you've had, which led you to these conclusions. It also doesn't feel right to project your own emotions and mental states onto Sladester like you were doing in this interjection, to the point where it seems like you're less arguing that Boone shouldn't be this harsh towards Sladester, and more that he shouldn't be this harsh towards you. You give us no reason to believe that your mental state is similar to that of Sladester's, outside of this vague notion of you not having sanity, which could mean a variety of different things. This is genuinely one of the most poorly explained videos I have ever come across.
I can't just give you advice, send you on your way to hopefully improve. No. I have to Desolator magic you. I have to Alexander Kayford you. I have to Corey Margera you.
I'm guessing those are people you covered, and in this context, I guess you are saying, I have to destroy you. Which, given how stupid and how little harm Shadow has done, this doesn't feel like the right way to approach him.
Oh my fucking god, this video is so fucking repetitive. You've already said this multiple times, that you don't think Sladester's going to do harm and that you think he's an idiot. This video could be half its length and you could still have made all the same points because you repeat yourself so fucking much.
I don't know, maybe I disagree with your sort of honor code or something.
Okay, so I'll ignore the fact you said otter code and not honor code. and instead just make the point of you're quite literally basing this entire interjection off of, by your own admission, assumptions. You don't know who these people are or what Boone means by that, so you saying it doesn't feel like the right way to handle it doesn't work as a criticism of Boone.
The fact that you can see what happened in 2016 and somehow call Corey the one who came out on top in that discussion proves to me how few brain cells you actually have. And you present with all the fucking traits, including your complete and utter inability to make a point beyond spouting meaningless buzzwords with a lack of self-awareness reserved for the driest of BuzzFeed articles with half the vocabulary. You call people spouting Among Us memes scum, and yet you keep responding to them because I'm guessing you find that concept pretty fucking relatable, whether it be because you can relate to being a pile of shit yourself, or because hearing the word imposter makes you cringe because it reminds you of how artificial your human existence is.
More dehumanization of the opponent, and Jesus Christ, you didn't have to go there? It ain't like Shadow is an NPC, he's just an idiot lolcow who makes bad videos.
So we'll ignore the fact that Boone didn't actually say anything dehumanizing in the clip you played. After all, the entire thesis of these final thoughts is comparing him to Corey Margera, who is a human. And instead just point out you quite literally dehumanized him, though, through calling him a lolcow. What do you think a cow is? And it's a term you use a lot, by the way. You put the word in the title of your video. I should note, this isn't even something that I would normally even think about. However, if Rin wants to sit here and claim that Boone is dehumanizing Sladester, all I'm saying is, maybe they should make sure they aren't constantly using terminology that compares Sladester to a fucking cow.
Like, you can just laugh at him. You could just point at a distance and laugh. It's not that deep.
Couldn't pointing at him and laughing also do mental damage? Well, according to the CNBC article, which to be fair didn't exist until a few months after Rin's video, the answer is yes, especially if what they're being made fun of for in some way connects to a mental illness. I wish to remind you all that Rin keeps saying that Sladester is a lolcow and mentally unstable, and at the very least implying those two things are connected.
You don't need to squish him like a bug, like he's already dead, bro. Like, the most he's lied about from what I saw is Daisy's Foxtrot's video upload date on him.
Foxtrot, not Foxtrot. Also, why would you assume that's a lie? Fuck, Boone didn't even assume that was a lie. He admitted it was entirely possible that was just a mistake on Sladester's part.
A commentary I saw the video was made in February 2022 by Daisy Foxtrot, and it was just really bad. The commentary you speak of was released on January 21st, 2022. So, either you watched it in February and confused the date you watched it with the release date, or you're a liar. I'd like to think it's the former, but, well, as I've already shown and will continue to show, there's just this warped sense of reality you demonstrate in all of this that makes me a little more uncertain.
You just sound very salty. What a pile of shit, guys. A possibly low-functioning autistic doing silly shit and lashing out when getting bandwagoned. Where have I heard that before? Oh yeah, that.
Okay, so you remember how you got onto Boone for leaving people in the dark in reference to who Corey Margera is? You're doing that again. This time you're not even giving the name of the person in question, you're just showing their profile picture and hoping the audience knows who you're talking about. Luckily, I do know who this is. For those unaware, the person on screen was Princess Elizabeth 013. And there are a lot of issues with this comparison. Among them, Princess Elizabeth was a child during her situation, while Sladester, as far as I can tell at least, is an adult. This is also important because one of the main catalysts behind her situation was her consistent homophobia and transphobia, which, best as I can tell, came from a very specific form of Christianity she followed at the time that was taught to her by her fundamentalist, bigoted parents. Notice how none of that fits Sladester in the slightest. These situations are so wildly different that I really don't get why you think comparing them would be appropriate. Yes, both were autistic, however, they were both criticized for incredibly different reasons, and they had incredibly different reasons for doing the actions they were criticized for. Furthermore, remember how I said that I was willing to give you the benefit of the doubt and assume you weren't trying to paint Boone as a mental abuser? This is where you lose that generosity with me. I'm going to use both of Jar's videos about his past as sources here because they go into detail about this situation rather well. However, what those people essentially did amounted to more or less witch hunting somebody who, again, was a child at the time, and going after anybody who said they were crossing a line for whatever reasons they could possibly muster, regardless of how little sense they made. Boone is not doing that, so this comparison is in horrible taste at nicest. Again, I am left simply asking the question of why you went to such an extreme example. And the only reason I can really muster is either you're incredibly bad at comparisons, or you are actively trying to paint Boone as similar to these people, while giving yourself just enough cover so it doesn't come off as you explicitly saying such.
In a sense, I am impressed. Because you can find a way of saying absolutely fucking nothing while still having words spew from your mouth like the sewage that it fucking is. Some people are going to get onto me for being this harsh.
That's me.
But again, pointless!
I'm sure. But now's the part where you find out why. I have no advice for you. Why? Because I have enough experience with people like you to know that you don't fucking change. You'll provide a lip service to improvement, but will do nothing to change yourself until someone puts you so far under the dirt that you have no choice but to either examine how you got in this hole to begin with, or make the dirt your fucking home. So that's what I'm here to do. Spike you into the fucking ground and see if you can figure it out, because you damn sure ain't even gonna realize something is wrong for as long as you can get back up without having to think too much about it.
I know you're not going to listen to me, but I'll make a video over an hour long and see if you listen to me. I know you kinda hate me, but I'm gonna do it anyway. But figure it out yourself and I'm gonna insult you like crazy. Can you please decide what you want here? It isn't like Shadow is a prolific liar or serial abuser. This attitude is not warranted in my opinion. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you could say his actions display a warped sense of reality if you want. One that apparently makes him not worth taking seriously in any way whatsoever if what you said about Sladester is to be applied to Boone. Yeah, one of my core issues with the video is Rin isolates Boone's final thoughts so hard that they eventually become, well, Sladester. Hell, you could even use some of the same criticisms you've levied at Boone towards Sladester. Remember that rant on the Among Us fanbase you played earlier? Well, the Among Us fanbase isn't made up of prolific liars or serial abusers, are they? In that case, why is it okay, or at the very least not worth criticizing in anything but the most mocking sense, that he said he was going to go road rage on them? Hell, why aren't you just laughing at Boone instead of doing this whole fucking commentary? This is genuinely one of the worst commentaries I have ever seen, because if I were to accept what Rin says as true, and to be clear, I don't, the commentary actually ends up worse. And I don't think I've ever had that happen before.
You even made a video somewhat recently as of scripting where you said you were going to take measures to improve yourself. But yet, what's in that video?
If you're gonna start crap with me, if you're gonna shove bad taste down my throat, Pokemon is overrated. Fact. Not an opinion, but a fact. A scientifically proven fact that can never, ever be debated or argued.
That's proof right there. that it is at the core of who you are. You are fucking corrupted by hatred, malice, and spite. You are fucking corrupted by hatred, malice, and spite.
Why did you play that twice?
Wait, what? Jesus Christ. A video getting angry and lashing out ain't hatred, malice, and spite. That's just anger issues at most. I don't think a lack of self-awareness and sheltered thinking is malice, dude.
What do you mean by sheltered thinking, and how do you know he has it? Furthermore, even if I granted you that, how would you know that is specifically what Boone is referring to when he made this statement? What about the clips Boone has showed of Sladester make him come off as sheltered to you? You don't explain that either. And by the way, what about Sladester's actions fail to qualify as this? Why isn't Sladester these things? You describe what he's done and then say it doesn't fit the category Boone put it in, but you don't actually present an argument as to why that is. Although, to be fair, you did begin the interjection by saying you don't think it's the case, meaning this could just be a subjective view of yours, but if that's really the only thing you have, then my entire response is, you don't think Boone accurately labeled these things? Okay, Boone thinks he did. You need to present an argument as to why you feel this way in order for this statement to have any meaning.
I think it's just being dumb. It's not that it's not that deep, man. Like, really.
You say as you use a meme where the use of that phrase is clearly sarcastic.
No joke. I actually felt the need to pitch shift that video after seeing it because I wasn't entirely sure that you weren't just Corey with a voice changer after hearing you with the exact same tones, the exact same inflections, the exact same words. I mean, you can talk about changing all you want, but I've seen you so many times in so many different visages. Either you realize why you've been spiked into your hole, or you stay there where you fucking belong. I don't give a fuck either way. Now, about that pony.
Okay, so there was no reason for you to include anything after Boone said, I don't give a fuck either way. It has nothing to do with what you're talking about. You should have cut the video a little earlier.
You clearly care, though. Why else would you make this over an hour long and you give helpful criticisms to Shadow? Why else would you even compliment him at the beginning of the video, albeit backhandedly? Could you have made it clear that this was to help the audience then, or to set an example?
What would be the point in doing so, especially given you apparently already were able to come to the conclusion that was his intention based off of the video as is? Would stopping the commentary to spoon-feed that to his viewers really be necessary?
If you didn't care, you wouldn't make the video. It's the simple truth. So, I guess I will move on to my conclusion. The outro kinda ruined this video for me. I know videos can live up in spite of mistakes, so maybe I feel the outro could be cut, but here's my thing with the outro. It feels oddly venti.
I have no idea what that criticism is supposed to communicate. I'm just going to be blunt. Nor do I even really understand why that would be a problem. And again, you don't explain anything. So, you know what? I'm not going to try to figure it out.
I feel it could have been left in the drafts. I know you were trying to be with Harsh for reasons.
Oh, that's good. I thought you were under the assumption that Boone did that for no reason whatsoever, which is actively impossible.
But that's not the point I'm making here. Maybe I just have a different sort of honor code. Maybe I disagree with your sort of honor code or something. But I feel whenever someone earns my disgust or insults, they have to be of the following. They either have to have destroyed people's lives over nothing or arduous things.
Over-engaging in difficult to accomplish tasks, because that's what the word arduous means. I think you might have meant arbitrary.
or a prolific liar that knows what they're doing and refuses to stop.
As opposed to an accidental liar, I guess.
Stalks people for years and refuses to stop stalking. A sex offender or a pro-contact zoophile. When it comes to those things, I don't think Sonic Shadow. I think people who have led a fan base that ruined innocent people, or hurt children, or hurt animals.
Do you think of the Among Us fan base when you think of that? Because otherwise, why exactly should Sladester be let off the hook as a simple loony person as opposed to somebody who's being equally disrespectful to people who don't deserve it? And I keep going back to that because it genuinely is one of the most frustrating aspects of the video. You open this video by showing us something that you believe should be pointed at and laughed at as opposed to being harshly criticized. And what you end up showing, again, is not really all that different from what you portray Boone's video as being. You going after him, again, has the exact same issues as what you claim Boone is doing to Sladester, if I were to believe your arguments. Although given the large amount of insults you have slung Sladester's way throughout this commentary, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to think in truth.
I just think Sonic Shadow is dumb.
But don't you dare insult him.
He's not this malicious monster you're thinking he is. He's an odd one, but he's human.
Remember that these beautiful pieces of art were made by people. And what are people aside from humans? I'm only human after all, so don't put the blame on me.
This clip also works.
Yo, Phalus dude, Shredder's there! I'm a human, remember? Well, he is right in front of you, but I guess I can't argue with that.
He's not worth your attention and your angry energy, and by you giving him that, you're giving him power and victimhood. Whether you like it or not, people like him tend to thrive off of this.
Wait, I thought you said Boone was hurting him. Now you're saying that Boone is giving him exactly what he thrives off of anyway? In that case, what exactly is the problem here? You talk about how damaging this could be, while also saying this is essentially what would fuel him.
You're not a therapist, you're not a psychologist giving him advice or just giving him help. You're just a schmuck.
Oh, nice insult. So, since you said earlier that there were only very specific things people could do that would justify insulting them, which of those has Boone engaged in?
And you're trying to help him with your videos, but deep down you know you can't help him.
I just want to point out how you say that Boone isn't a therapist, I assume in an attempt to imply that he's psychoanalyzing Sladester in some way, only to then go on to psychoanalyze him, which would be incredibly important for therapy to occur. So, are you a therapist now? And as for this mention of Boone knowing deep down inside he can't help Sladester, how the fuck would you know that? No, seriously, even ignoring the utter hypocrisy of you putting the two statements you did back to back, I want an answer as to how you would know how Boone is feeling internally.
Your outro is incredibly contradictory. You seem exasperated, which is understandable, but sometimes people like Sonic Shadow just don't listen. This video isn't here to help Sonic Shadow. You don't have to listen to me, and I'm not making this public for a reason because I'm just scared of getting on your bad side, or anyone's bad side, really. I may come across as a hypocrite, but I'm not here to insult you.
Then why did you call him a schmuck?
You haven't done anything to warrant that from me. Sonic Shadow probably won't improve anytime soon. I'm saying probably mainly because I don't want to say he will never improve or listen. That's just wrong. Lolcows just need to scream in the void before realizing they need to improve or swing back into reality.
Didn't you basically say that he was mentally unwell earlier? I'm sorry, how the fuck is somebody who does not operate on the same level of reality as us just wake up one day and go, I'm going to be stable from now on? Anyway, that's all of the video itself that I want to cover, but that does not mean the commentary is done. That does mean this is where part 1 is ending, though. See you all in part 2.
Same bat time, same bat channel.